You ready, Madam Clerk?
Ready, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. It's convene today's GAE meeting on what is officially possibly the last day of summer. Now it's the first day of school for many people, so I deem that the last day of summer. Welcome you all back. Good to see everyone. Today we're here to convene a meeting having to do with the explanatory text for the November ballot question. Item number 2 on our agenda, remarks by any remarks by the chairs. Senator Flexer, any comments? Senator Sampson or Representative Mastrofesco? Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just welcome everyone back and say I hope everyone's having a very nice summer, and this should prove to be an interesting meeting. I've been going over the content of today's discussion and look forward to an important opportunity for us to really get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Mastrofesco, any comments or remarks?
Nope, just it's nice to see everyone. Hopefully everybody had a great summer. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Moving on, item number 3, consideration of the explanatory text for no ballot question. Is there a motion to approve the explanatory text?
So moved.
Made by Senator Flexer, second.
Second.
Second by Representative McCarthy-Vahey. Motion made and seconded. The matter before us is resolution of Act number 21-1, resolution approving an amendment to the state constitution to allow for early voting. Process is somewhat of a unique one. You all received an email earlier today concerning the process, the underlying process. The statute was designed to ensure that the statute being 2-30A was designed to ensure that the explanatory text be nonpartisan, not a political one. The suggestions that you are making, the OLR has been charged with drafting the proposed language in explanatory text, and they are charged with being a nonpartisan text. Our role as a committee is as a check on the process to ensure that we are in agreement the text is accurate but not actual drafters of the text. As such, it is not our position. Our role today is to vote yes or no, and we are not in a position, and nor do we have the authority pursuant to the underlying statute to amend the proposed text before us. Any questions or comments on the explanatory text? Senator Sims, I think I see your hand raised. Is that correct?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know what brought on the opening comments. I thought we might discuss what is the content that is before us, and maybe we can end up down the road of discussing whether or not we approve of this language. I just want to remind everyone why we are here in some slightly more detail, which is that when a constitutional amendment is passed by the legislature, its next stop is to go before the citizens of Connecticut for a vote. And that constitutional amendment will only become part of our Constitution if it passes by a majority vote this November election. The question, if I remember correctly, and Mr. Chairman, can I just confirm with you that the question that is included in the explanatory text at the top was in fact voted on by the legislature and approved? That's how we got to the question. Is that correct?
That's correct. That was included within House Joint Resolution 59. That's correct, sir.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So there's not much we can do about the question. I'll just bring everyone back to the debate and remind everyone that there are some of us who have varying opinions about early voting. In my case in particular, I ultimately voted against the constitutional amendment going to the voters because I believed that the policy that was drafted is just far too broad. And my most important concern was that in the text of the bill and the constitutional amendment, if it is adopted, there is no limitation as to the number of days of early voting that could be adopted by the legislature. And to me, I think that is a huge caveat and something that stopped me from voting in favor of it. In fact, I think we offered at the time an amendment to allow for some amount of early voting. I think we had something where we would say 3 days, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, or Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I think that was the amendment that myself and my Republican colleagues offered that was rejected. And ultimately, we got the constitutional amendment that is before the voters now, which is does not specify any limits. And I remember at the time pointing out that that means that, you know, it could be as little as an additional day all the way up to the end of the previous election. I don't think that's likely, but it is not out of the realm of possibility that it could be a lengthy period. It could be, 7 days or 20 days or 2 months. And around the country, we've seen other states that have adopted lengthy periods of early voting go back to shortening that time frame. At any rate, my concern at the time and my concern today remains the same, which is that I believe that the voters deserve to know that that's part of this question, which is to say they are not just agreeing to early voting. They are agreeing to grant the legislature any amount of early voting that the majority chooses. And I think that's completely relevant. Another concern that I brought up at the time was security, ballot security. So what happens, if there is a period of early voting that's, 7 days or 2 weeks or whatever, who's watching those ballots? Who's maintaining those ballots? There is language in this statement before us that says that the requirement to deliver the election results sent to the Secretary of State under seal is being removed. And I understand that things are done electronically and so forth, but it just begs the question, what is happening with our election results, and are we maintaining enough ballot security? Would it be allowed to have the votes counted each day, or would we only count the ballots after the election was completed, that kind of thing? These are all questions that are left unanswered in the constitutional amendment question that will be before the voters. And finally, there is no question that no matter what happens, there is going to be a cost for all of this, because if you're going to have additional days of in-person voting, someone has got to man those polls, and someone has to be responsible to make sure that there's access for voters and so forth. And that typically is going to be passed on to the municipality where the voting is taking place, and ultimately the taxpayers in that municipality. So people can expect to see an increase in their property taxes as a result of early voting. And not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is an indisputable fact. In fact, part of my concerns that I was addressing with the nonpartisan staff through my staff today was that I think that each indisputable fact that's relevant to a decision made by a voter should be included in this explanatory text. And it appears to me that only the argument in favor of early voting was recognized. So can I ask, Mr. Chairman, where did the language for this statement come from? Was it the Office of Legislative Research alone, or was any legislator or legislative leadership or staff involved in the crafting of this document?
Thank you, Senator. That is a question that I think I may ultimately have to defer to OLR. I will say the underlying statute 2-30A, statute that requires OLR to prepare the text subject to the GAE committee's approval. So the language came from OLR, and if I'm not sure, don't know if that answers your question or not, sir.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you offered OLR the opportunity to state whether or not there was any legislative involvement in the production of this text. I would like to ask the question if I could.
By all means, OLR, if you'd like to address whether or not who's involved, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry Adams from OLR. And the text was drafted by OLR. We worked together with LCO to draft it. And, we submitted it to the chairs for comment. And, as was alluded to, comments were considered. But the text was prepared by, myself and my OLR colleague, Matt Frame, with assistance from Shannon and Mike from LCO.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Terry, I appreciate that answer, but in your answer, you said that it was offered to the chairs for comment. Did OLR receive comment from the chairs and ultimately take direction in drafting the document?
No, what you have before you was our original submission.
Okay. I appreciate that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
So just to clarify, Terry, so there was no involvement at all from Democratic or Republican members of this committee or otherwise in the drafting of this?
No, as Senator Sampson referenced, there was some back and forth with their counsel earlier, but the draft, what you have before you was our original product.
Okay, thank you. Senator Sampson, the floor is still yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I was speaking specifically to the production of the item that is on our agenda today. The conversation that I had with the nonpartisan staff through my staff happened subsequent to the document. It was me questioning the final work product. It's been stated, Mr. Chairman, you stated right out of the gate that this document cannot be amended here today. But just because I have gone through the process of drafting an amendment, I would like to offer it. If you would choose to not allow me, I think we should do that officially. So, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to this document, and the clerk is in possession of it. I'd like to have it distributed, and I'd like a vote on it if possible.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator Flexer.
Mr. Chair, point of order. An amendment is not properly before this committee on this matter pursuant to the process that's laid out in statute 2-30A.
Thank you, Senator Flexer. I may now defer to LCO. Can they confirm whether or not that is the case?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Shannon McCarthy from LCO. I can confirm that the statute says the Office of Legislative Research shall prepare a concise explanatory text as to the content and purpose of the proposed constitutional amendment, subject to the approval of the Joint Standing Committee of the General Assembly having cognizance of constitutional amendments. The statute does not contemplate that being amended or modified by the committee. There are other statutes that refer to processes where it actually references the committee having some role in making modifications, but this statute does not, and it has been the longstanding precedent of the committee not to amend what is put before them.
Thank you, Attorney McCarthy. With that being said, I will rule that the amendment is not properly before the committee. And is that a word?
So, Mr. Chairman, is it proper to debate the merit of the chair's decision?
I don't believe the decision can be debated.
Can I have a clarification on that?
From LCO, can you clarify, please?
Well, the chair's decision, is it a debatable decision?
Mr. Chairman, I challenge the determination of the chair.
So the chair's ruling has been appealed. So now I believe procedurally we will go to a vote of the committee as to the chair's ruling. Is that correct, LCO?
It would be appropriate to debate and vote on a appealing of the ruling of the chair at this point.
All right, can I go first in the debate? I'll just
hang on one second. So we're now on the are we debating? I think the motion's been made. Well, the amendment's been proposed. Motion made that was not properly before the committee and out of order. The chair ruled that it was out of order. And so now, if LCO can clarify, we now need to vote on, then that ruling was appealed by Representative Fishbein. So before the committee now is whether or not my ruling of the motion was out of order is proper, I believe. That's correct, LCO?
Yes, that's correct.
And so now we need to vote on that, or?
Chairman, I believe we're entitled to debate.
We're entitled to debate.
Attorney McCarthy, is that correct?
I believe that is a debatable motion traditionally.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney McCarthy.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know my colleagues.
Of course, Senator Sampson, please proceed.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, sir. So I'm very familiar with section 2-30A, and I have the text before me as well. And just to refresh everyone's memory, it says that the Office of Legislative Research shall prepare a concise explanatory text as to the content and purpose of the proposed constitutional amendment, subject to the approval of the Joint Standing Committee of the General Assembly having cognizance of constitutional amendments, which is us. So
Mr. Chair, Senator, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but point of order, I believe that this debate has to be limited to the debate on the appeal and not the substance of the matter before the committee. Point of order.
Thank you, Senator Flexer.
Chairman, counterpoint of order. I believe what Senator Sampson was addressing was the reasoning that was put forth by LCO as to in support of your determination. You did reach out to LCO.
Mr. Chair, a point of order is not debatable.
Thank you, Senator Flexer. I agree.
It's a counterpoint of order. So I could certainly posit a counterpoint of order to clarify. So I don't agree with Senator Flexer, and I believe that the gentleman was addressing what LCO directed you to rule. So it's appropriate in my opinion.
Thank you, Representative. So the question now before the committee is whether or not Senator Sampson is, Senator Flexer, can you just rephrase your point of order, please?
Mr. Chair, my point is that we have to debate the appeal of the chair.
that's what I'm doing, Madam.
As opposed to the underlying content, yes, okay. I tend to agree with Senator Flexer, Senator Sampson, so if we can try to refocus.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, but I didn't lose any focus. Your determination that the amendment that I offered was out of order was made by a clarification that you received from LCO. And you determined that it was out of order, and I'm appealing that chair's decision by saying it is in order. So it is completely proper for me to make my argument in contradiction to what was offered by Ms. McCarthy. And there's no reason for this to be contentious. I believe that it is in the best interest of the people of Connecticut for us to have this conversation. I'm not going to belabor the thing or take a long time to do it. And I think it's important for all our sakes. And in fact, I want to make it very clear, I'm doing this for all our sakes. Okay, it does not matter to me whether or not the opinion was, or this legislation passed with a Democrat majority and a Republican minority or vice versa. I could care less. I believe the voters of the state are entitled to all of the information when they make a decision. So the issue is whether Section 2-30A precludes an amendment from being allowed in our committee to alter the explanatory text. And I would say that the text that I just read to the committee that Ms. McCarthy also read does not say anywhere in it that it cannot be modified. In fact, it says subject to the approval of our committee. And I believe inherent in that approval is the ability to modify the text and offer other changes. And I'll just say that, one of the reasons why people get confused about this is because we happen to operate in the Connecticut General Assembly, where there is this unwritten point of view, which is backwards, that somehow anything in order for it to happen in the state of Connecticut must require enabling legislation. And that's not how this system works in Connecticut or across our country. We are free people, and this committee of lawmakers has the sole and exclusive right to make laws. No one else, not OLR, nobody else gets to make laws. We get to make laws. And effectively, when we vote on this, we will be making law. And the idea that somehow lawmakers who represent the people of Connecticut are not allowed to interject and alter this document, and that we are simply here to rubber stamp the work product of the nonpartisan staff. And I have great respect for them. I don't mean any disrespect whatsoever. It's just they have a different role. And I believe that the explanatory text that was put before us is partisan in nature. And I would offer the proof to that I disagree with it. If it was simply objective and included, as I mentioned before, undisputed facts, then no one could argue it. But I believe that it is improper for us to be prevented from offering amendments as lawmakers. And I would like the chair to reconsider whether or not our amendment could be offered at the very least. It sounds to me like there is very little danger that our amendment would be offered or would be accepted based on the interpretation of the chair. But to deny me or anyone else in the committee of either party the ability to have say on this document, I believe is improper.
Thank you, Senator Sampson, for your comments. Any further comments or questions for the committee? Representative Mastrosco, I'll make Representative Mastrosco, I'll defer to you. It's ranking. I'll defer to you. Representative Fishbein. Please proceed, Representative Mastrosco. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're on the subject of the amendment that Senator Sampson wants to put through. And I don't know if you'll rule me out of order on this. And I guess I have a question maybe for OLR to clarify for me. What is the process then if you're saying that section 2-30A does not allow for an amendment? I don't see it in here, but this is what we're being told. What is the exact process if something wanted to be changed? Now, I understand this whole process, we want it to be nonpartisan, right? And if you put language together and you send it off to the chairs of the committee, I never got an email with the draft on it, right? If I had gotten an email, certainly you would want both sides, because you want this to be nonpartisan, to talk together to make sure that we are all in agreement on the language, because you don't want this to be a partisan issue, especially when it comes to voting. We should all be able to talk about it. So what is the process, I'm wondering, to change something on what OLR put together?
Representative, if I may, I'm not entirely, I think there's a motion before the committee. I'm not sure if this is directly related to the motion. Nothing but the matter before the committee now is the motion, the amendments to file, the motion was not ruled not probably before the committee. That ruling was appealed. I'm not sure if your question goes to that or the underlying process itself. I think it may go to the underlying process as opposed to the matter directly before the committee right now. So I may have to ask you to hold off on your question until we get through this.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My point was that because it is ruled that we cannot make changes to that and you cannot call the amendment, I guess it does kind of speak to it. I'm just curious of what is the process then? But if you want me to wait, I have no problem doing that either, but I just want to get an answer.
I understand the question, and I think it may have to wait until we get through this procedural motion here.
Okay.
I think we've got the procedure before us, but the ruling of the chair has been appealed, so I think we got to get through that before we can. I think your question is a valid one and a good one needs to be addressed. I think that has to wait until we get through this procedural question here.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I get that opportunity, because I don't want, once this part is done, to say that I am not talking specific to the topic.
Of course.
Follow me?
That's fair, understood.
Okay, I'll wait.
Representative Fishbein, do you have a question as to the matter before the committee or the something in line with Representative Mastrosco's?
No, I intend to deal with what is before the committee at its present time.
Right.
I don't intend to ask any questions. I intend to argue why the ruling of the chair should be overturned, which is before the committee presently. You know, the bipartisan nature of many committees is different on many committees. And the mere fact that we don't even know what the amendment would be is troubling. But, you know, that notwithstanding, you know, a ruling has been made and removed. We did hear that comments were considered from OLR. That's troubling. But we look at 2-30A, and there's a clause in there that's been read a few times, subject to the approval of the Joint Standing Committee. So it begs the question, what if the committee doesn't approve? Somebody has to opine as to changes that will be made to this document. It's not OLR operating in a vacuum. There are no cases that support the position being taken by OLR. I've been diligently researching this issue. I've gone through the precedent book that we have that's on the CGA website. There's no reference that I find to anything like this. So we are left with, as OLR has presented, is the long-standing traditional ruling of the committee. Well, that is not necessarily based upon the law. So we are guided by the law. We are guided by our rules. Our rules don't say that explanatory texts are not modifiable, are not amendable. So I don't know, other than tradition, where this ruling comes from. When we look at the statute, that clause, subject to the approval of the Joint Standing Committee, Mr. Chairman, as you know, basic statutory construction is that every word must have a meaning. The legislature chose to put that in here. If this process is merely rubber stamp, if this committee has no input as to possible amendments to it, then that language is unnecessary. It means nothing. It should be removed. But it does stand there. It stands there and it sits there today. We are guided by the statute. OLR has told us, look at 2-30. I mean, we were told before that it says something about no amendments. It doesn't say that. It says subject to the approval. Therefore, you know, I do respectfully object to the ruling that's before us. I think we should have that good-natured debate on possibly amending this, and certainly, Mr. Chairman, you would be able to referee that. I don't think that you would hear of any amendments that are troublesome. They aren't, well, we don't even know what they are. The public doesn't know what they are. And it's troubling that an undefined process, not approved by this committee, not approved by the legislature, is dictating keeping those amendments from the eyes of the public. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Here, is there anything further as to the motion before the committee? Senator Sampson, your hand is raised. Is that for the underlying motion or is that for something different? You're on mute, sir.
I'm sorry, I just have a follow-up on the motion. Yeah, just to bring us back to where we are, which is that you have denied the ability of myself to offer an amendment to this committee based on the information provided by the nonpartisan staff, and that has been appealed. And so the conversation is really about whether or not the information you were provided is accurate. And just while having this, listening to Representative Fishbein, it occurred to me that this is really a separation of powers issue. And I actually pulled up an OLR report about separation of powers. It's 94R0596 from June 23rd, 1994, in case anyone's interested. And it's very fascinating because it brings up State versus Stoddard. And it's quite clear that, you know, there is a very significant concern with the delegation of legislative authority. And I believe that's what's happening here. If we are providing OLR the sole ability to produce a document that is voted into law by this body, that strikes me as a delegation of powers. In this OLR report, it says that if a delegation of powers is made, it has to be designed to accomplish a particular purpose. It has to be very thorough. It has to be very accurate. It also says if the legislature fails to prescribe with reasonable clarity the limits of the power delegated, or if those limits are too broad, its attempt to delegate is a nullity. And I think that's where we are. If there is no clarity on whether or not the text of, what is it, 2-30A, subject to the approval of the GAE committee, includes our ability to amend, I've got to conclude that this statute should be null. And I'll just leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. And the closing part of this argument is that no harm comes from an amendment heard and voted on by this committee to put this explanatory text before voters. None. In fact, only a positive and a reminder of our American system of representative government is the end result. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? If not, Madam Chair, I believe you'll take the roll. I think the motion before us, as I said, the amendment was attempt to make a motion amendment. We rule out of order. I ruled that the amendment was in fact out of order. There was appeal, so that's what we're voting on. So a yes vote, and clerk, please clarify also, a yes vote is supporting the chair's ruling, and no vote is disagreeing with the chair's ruling. Is that correct, LCO? They're nodding their heads, yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as long as it's clear what people are voting for, that's fine.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Flexer,
Senator Flexer votes yes.
Fox,
Representative Fox votes yes.
Haskell, Thomas,
Representative Thomas votes yes.
Sampson,
Senator Sampson votes no.
Master Francesco,
Representative Master Francesco votes no.
Blumenthal,
Representative Blumenthal votes yes.
Carpino, Fishbein,
Mr. Chairman, I just have I thought we're voting on appealing the ruling of the chair, which means a yes would overrule the vote of the chair.
Thank you, Representative. I don't think we can clarify now, or prior to the vote, I confirmed LCO indicated yes, is going to be support the chair's ruling, and a no will be in opposition to the chair's ruling. LCO indicated that so long as the committee is clear what they're voting on, and then we can proceed that manner. So that's what we're doing. So yes vote upholds the ruling of the chair, no vote is in opposition to the rule to the chair's ruling.
Understood. Given those reverse confines, I guess I'm voting no, although I'm in support of my motion. So
France,
Representative France votes no.
Haddad,
Representative Haddad votes yes.
Labriola,
Representative Labriola votes no.
McCarthy Vegi,
Representative McCarthy Vegi votes yes.
McCrory,
Senator McCrory votes yes.
Morin Bello,
Representative Morin Bello votes yes.
Palm,
Representative Palm votes yes.
Rosario,
Representative Rosario votes yes.
Santiago,
Santiago votes yes.
Slack, Haskell,
Senator Haskell votes yes.
Carpino, Slack. All set, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Hey, Madam Clerk, when you're ready, please announce the tally.
Yay, 5 nay, 2 absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ruling of the chair is upheld. Moving on, Senator Sampson, your hand is raised. Floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, I believe I still have the floor since I was
That's correct.
speaking when I offered the amendment before all of that stuff occurred. I wanted to let some of my colleagues also interject. I know Representative Master Francesco had some more things to say, so I will just briefly make my final comment about this whole thing, which is I think it's a tragedy. My issue with the legislation when it passed was that I felt that it was not fair to the voters of Connecticut, since they were not going to have a clear distinction about what they were voting for as a constitutional amendment. I refer to it as the free lunch amendment because it's like asking someone if they want free lunch, but then not sharing with them what the lunch is, which, as we can all imagine, might make all the difference in the world. people deserve to know whether or not this is going to be for 2 days or 20 days or 100 days of early voting. They deserve to know. They also deserve to know that this might impact their own pocketbook at some point. And they also deserve to know what measures of ballot security and integrity will be in place. And the question fails to address that. And this process, which was, in my understanding, supposed to be a completely objective, nonpartisan statement of fact about what this bill and constitutional amendment will accomplish, should be complete when it goes before the voters. And the fact that it's not complete is an injustice, in my opinion, and a very unfortunate one. We each had the opportunity to understand all the ins and outs and the pluses and minuses of this legislation when we voted yes or no on it. And I can't understand for the life of me why we would prevent the voters from having that same luxury. And that's what's happening in the question, and that's what's happening in this explanatory text. And I'm especially disappointed since the process here was supposed to be completely objective and nonpartisan. Anyway, I just wanted to be on the record with that. I have a great deal of mistrust of our election system in the state. Earlier today, I made a press release discussing that the policies of the last couple of years, which were all sold to Connecticut voters as for the purpose of keeping people safe and providing access, well, we're finding out now that they are being used by election campaigns for the purpose of targeting their preferred voters and giving themselves an advantage. That was dishonest then, and this process is dishonest now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very much, Professor Hanchers, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we have voted on that ruling, I wanted to get back to my previous question, if I may, to find out from OLR, LCO, or someone to explain to me really what is the process to make changes on this language for the explanatory text. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Representative. I think to the extent I can answer that, I will try. I think the process, and if I'm not sufficient, then by all means, pass along to the nonpartisan staff. Process is that the text was proposed, you got to vote for it or vote against it. Vote against it, goes back to the drawing board, you vote for it, the text is approved and then included. So I think that I'm not sure that answers your question. I'd rather further information from the nonpartisan staff.
Thank you for that answer. So basically, OLR can put an explanatory text together and basically put in whatever they want. And then we have to, as a committee, this is where it gets partisan, right? This is the issue that I have. I get the OLR as a nonpartisan staff, right? They're called a nonpartisan staff. But again, that draft went out to the chairmans of the committee. I never received a draft from OLR. I got it from our good chairman, Mr. Fox. He was good enough to send me a draft of the language. I don't think I got the final language till today. So if we're trying to really be nonpartisan, I don't understand why this committee wouldn't get together, get the draft, talk about it, and then talk to the OLR to have them change it to make it right. So we get to a place like we are today. It is truly nonpartisan. Unfortunately, what has happened today that it is partisan, because the process in my mind is incorrect, that one entity, one department in the state can draft up whatever language they like. We got to go back to our committee and we vote yes or no, up or down. Well, we all know, listen, this is politics. It is partisan when you get in your committees, especially when you don't have a conversation about it before the meeting. So in fact, it is partisan, and that's the issue that I have with it. I think the amendment that Senator Sampson wanted to offer truly would have given the public an insight as to exactly what they're voting for. It almost reminds me, or it does remind me, when we're debating issues on the floor, you're voting on a title, and the devil is always in the details, and people don't really understand it until you explain it to them. And we do. We debate them on the floor, and we explain in detail of the pros and the cons of a bill. It's no different here in this committee, explaining to the people exactly what the pros and the cons are of it. This is not just a bill where we can go into session and just change overnight. We are changing our document. We are changing the Constitution of the state. It is a big deal, and I believe the voters really need to know what they're voting for, whether it's good or bad. They may reject it, they may not, they may all well support it. And I'm comfortable with that as long as they know exactly what they're voting for. But there's just a lot of issues with this. And like I said, when I debated it on the floor, people not knowing exactly what the time frame is that they're going to be voting. Technically right now we do have in-person voting. I believe anybody can go into town hall once those absentee ballots are there. They can go in and say, I'm going to be out of town, going to be out of town, and I need an absentee ballot. They can fill it out right there and vote. So I am very disappointed that this did turn into a partisan issue, because it is when you can't have any input on what this language is for both sides. Call it what you want. It's partisan, and that's unfortunate. And voting issues should not be like that. We should be making sure that we represent everybody in the state. So I am disappointed in that respect, but I have no further comments at this point, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions? Representative Fishbein, your hand is raised. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chair, I didn't know, since we're being asked to approve this document, I had some things that I wanted to ask the creators why they aren't in here. Who would I direct those questions to?
Thank you, Representative. I believe your question will be directed towards either Attorney Adams or Attorney Frame from OLR.
Okay, no problem. So, looking at the resolution in conjunction with the explanatory text, I didn't see any portion of the explanatory text that explains to the public that the legislature could provide for early voting in July, let's say. Is there a reason why the time period was not addressed in this explanatory text?
Attorney Adams or Attorney Frame?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just clarification, I'm actually not an attorney. So just for the record, but so as was said earlier, what CGS 2-30A requires is that OLR prepare a concise explanatory text as to the content and purpose of the resolution. And what the resolution says is the General Assembly may further provide by law for voting in person prior to the day of election in the choice of any officer to be elected, or upon any question to be voted on at an election by qualified voters of the state. And so, that's all it says. And so what our text, we generally confine ourselves to what's in the resolution and we don't really get into what's not in the resolution, because any number of things are not in the resolution. And so in keeping with the statute, we just said what the resolution provides. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Representative Fishbein, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And dealing with that statutory guidance, where in the explanatory text does it explain the purpose? You specifically mentioned that the explanatory text is supposed to, I don't see a section that deals with purpose.
Mr. Adams?
I think it's sort of, it would be that first paragraph. If the amendment is approved, it would allow the General Assembly to pass legislation establishing in-person voting before the day of an election. And then under further explanation, we sort of talk about how the state constitution has various provisions about time, place, and manner that currently do not allow the legislature to do so. And so this amendment would provide express authority for the legislature if it chooses to enact early voting legislation. So I think it's incorporated there. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Fishbein.
And I appreciate that, but I take purpose as the statutory guidance is to mean, what is the purpose for having this modification of the Constitution? For instance, to allow more people to be able to vote. That would be a purpose, right? To prohibit cheating in elections. That may be a purpose, right? That's the purpose for the amendment. I don't see addressed anywhere in this. It talks about procedure. I got it. It talks about the current Constitution. It doesn't talk about the purpose, and I think the purpose is created by the legislature, right? We are the gatekeepers. So is there a reason why, Mr. Chairman, I'm not asking to ask a question a second time, but I think my definition of purpose is a little bit different than the document that we have before us. So I just wanted to give an opportunity to answer again if that's appropriate.
Hey, I think Mr. Adams addressed that already. I will, if you want to speak to it again, feel free, but I think the question was asked and answered. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I would just refer back to my previous answer through you.
Representative Fishbein?
Okay, can you just point to where in this explanatory text it says the purpose of anywhere?
Mr. Adams?
So to your point, we don't have a specific heading purpose. I think I would refer back to my earlier comment where it sort of, it allows the General Assembly to pass legislation establishing in-person early voting. Currently, the Constitution does not allow it. If this amendment passes, it would allow the General Assembly, if it chooses, to take up such legislation. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Fishbein.
Yeah, I think I just think there's a difference of opinion there. Also, with regard to perhaps cost to municipalities, I guess taking off on the prior answer, in talking to various town clerks around the state, there's a concern that if the legislature permits voting in August, they will be a unfunded mandate by the state. Is there a reason why those concerns are not addressed in the explanatory text?
Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the explanatory text is limited to the proposed resolution. Any cost to municipalities would depend on, what legislation, if legislation is taken up, and what its specifics are. And in OLR, that's not our role to determine fiscal impact. It's OFA would be responsible for that. And so the resolution itself, it just authorizes the legislature to enact this legislation, but any fiscal impact would have to be determined at a later date. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one other area of inquiry. Can somebody please explain what's going on with the seal thing? Because it's not in the question. The public's not going to know about it. What is this issue with the seal? What's going on? Through you, Mr. Chair, to whomever.
Representative, the seal thing, what was the question? What are you referring to? The steel thing?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that, although the
Called the
question,
seal.
yeah, the question only has to do with early voting. This issue about a seal is not even addressed in the question, which I think is improper. But what's going on?
I did not correctly hear the word you were asking. I thought you were asking for the steel, not the seal. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, so sometimes in OLR, it's the smallest changes that are the most challenging for us to describe, but there are a couple of places in the resolution where the phrase under seal is bracketed, and we did check the legislative history from 2019 and 2021, and there was no reference. It didn't come up in the debate or any of the testimony. But at the same time, anyone looking at the resolution would see these brackets and think, what do they mean? And they're not really part of, they don't really go with the part about receiving the vote, so we can't really group them there. At the same time, we can't just say that it's technical, but so we had to say something about it. And so that's why we just started to have, two quick sentences saying this is what it does. And But there's also a statute on the books that continues to provide that. So it is in the resolution, and for that reason, we couldn't not say anything about it, but we just tried to deal with it as short and simply as we could. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Fishbein.
I didn't learn anything about what we're doing with the seal from that, with all due respect. What is the situation presently under the law having to do with the seals, and what would be the change in the Constitution should this question pass? I guess that's perhaps a more pointed question.
And if I recall from the debate, Representative Fishbein may chime in here, and this is several months, not years ago at this point. I think the seal, years and years ago, literally meant under like an actual seal, like a thumbprint of sorts, and sealing the document. I believe that, if I recall from the debate, that was the case. And so this is just removing. So years ago, when the votes were delivered, they were delivered under seal, like a virtual thumbprint in a wax kind of candle type thing. I think that's what it was from. Whereas now, the fact that votes are now and then results are now transferred now, that is no longer necessary. I believe. I think that, if I recall correctly, that was just my foggy recollection, but I think that may have been it.
So that presently under our law, it contemplates some sort of physical, like voter rolls and physical ballots being transported somewhere utilizing some sort of medium that assures that whatever satchel or box is not opened up from point A to point B, and that as a result of technology, we no longer utilize that system. Is that what's going on here?
Mr. Evans, can you further clarify? Was my explanation somewhat proper?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's our best understanding, that it actually is sort of a relic from long ago when wax seals were still used. And to the question about the statute, it's 9-314 is the statute at issue, where it references the moderator shall also seal and deliver one of such duplicate lists to the Secretary of State. That's 9-314 sub A and sub B. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to figure out in this explanatory text where that, I've read this thing so many times, and I don't see how anyone gleans from this document. I guess I asked Mr. Chairman, where does it say? Is there a particular sentence that says this process is no longer necessary as a result of technology, which is what I'm hearing today? Is there a particular portion that I can look to that says that? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, it's just those first two sentences above the further explanation heading. And so, yeah, those are the two sentences where this issue is covered in the text. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Which two sentences? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Adams.
Above the heading further explanation, it's those two sentences, the second paragraph of the text. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Fishbein.
Mr. Chairman, that's the statute says purpose. If those are the two sentences that are supposed to explain to the general public why, and I'll read them. It says, additionally, approval of the amendment would eliminate the constitutional requirement that certain copies of election results, when sent to the Secretary of State, be under seal. It would not change the statutory requirement that these copies be sent under seal. Nowhere, no one can ever say that that has anything to do with purpose. purpose has to do with why we are doing this. What I'm hearing today is we are doing it because of advances in technology. What I just read to you says nothing about obsolescence, advances in technology, or anything like that. So, for that reason, we are supposed to vote on this. I don't intend on supporting this. I wish that we could work together in a bipartisan fashion to make changes to this, to address the purpose so that the public knows and is fully informed why they should support this. Because I know there's members of this committee that support this initiative. I would hope that members of this committee would want the public to be able to vote in favor of this initiative. This language scares people, with all due respect. So I intend to vote no against this document. So, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative, Senator Flexer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the process and how we got here a little bit. I know we're having a lot of conversation this afternoon. I want to emphasize that we're here today because the legislature had multiple bipartisan votes in support of a resolution to amend the state constitution with regard to early voting. And once that happens, the nonpartisan staff, as we've discussed at length today, has to prepare this explanatory text, which will be available to voters so that they can understand the question that will now be before them. The result of the legislature after our bipartisan vote on the resolution to amend the Constitution then goes to the voters on November 8th of this year. And our nonpartisan staff was charged with coming up with this text. And I want to be clear that it's the nonpartisan staff. It's not the bipartisan staff. It's not the members of this committee that are charged, according to the statute that we debated at some length earlier in this meeting, with coming up with it. And I want to just emphasize that our nonpartisan staff works very diligently to uphold that main title that they have, nonpartisan. And an action of the legislature was taken, and some may view the outcome to put this before the voters as partisan, and it is certainly a topic for debate that some members of the legislature agreed with and some members of the legislature did not agree with. Again, I would emphasize that it was a bipartisan vote to send the question of removing the language in the Constitution to permit early voting. That was a bipartisan vote, and that resolution passed and is being put to the voters this fall. But our nonpartisan staff is really, especially in this process, but in so much of their work, their question is not to interpret whether things are done in a bipartisan fashion, but their work is to make sure that the language that's available to voters is clear, that it is concise, and that it is a fair explanation of the question that will be on the ballot. Some people don't want this question to be on the ballot as was presented in the resolution, and that is certainly fair, and that is a fair argument for many of our colleagues to make. But I want to emphasize that the nonpartisan staff didn't decide what was in that resolution, but they were charged with trying to come up with a clear way for voters to understand what the question is that will be on their ballot on November 8th of this year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Flexer. Representative Thomas, your hand is raised. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much like Senator Flexer, I actually also wanted to chime in and correct the record, or at least clarify things for members of the public. A few times today, we have talked about a desire not to vote on the constitutional amendment without first knowing what early voting would look like in the state of Connecticut. So I wanted to clarify for the public that that was very much the debate in this committee. It was also the debate on the floor of the House, and for a third time, a debate on the floor of the Senate. Yet the resolution as written passed in all of those bodies, and definitely on the floor of the House and the Senate with bipartisan support. So I did want to clarify for the public, because I think they might find it confusing, that we have already considered whether or not this question should be written as is, or if it should be written to include exactly what early voting would look like, and that all those bodies agree that it would be written as is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Thomas. Any further question or comments? Representative Francesco, I may defer to Representative France. I had spoken. Would you mind if I went to Representative France first, Representative Francesco?
Sure.
All right, Representative France, and then I'll go to the members who have already spoken. Representative France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the opportunity. I guess I would appreciate the debate and the discussion. And as this is the second time around for this, I happen to be the ranking member on this committee when the original language was proposed, and worked with the chair at that time on the language of the constitutional amendment. And I supported the amendment at that time. My concern is in listening to the rationale as being presented by the proponents of this language as essentially whatever OLR provides this committee, we are just deemed to approve, and that is it. And when you look at the language within the statutory reference, it says subject to amendment, subject to approval of the Joint Standing Committee that has cognizance. That would be our committee. And the disappointment inherent in subject to approval is an amendment and debate process. And as we've already had the ruling that our amendment was out of order, I think that is, why is it subject to approval if there is no opportunity for debate and change and making the case that what OLR provided may not be sufficient for the public? That seems to be a counter to what the legislative process, at least in my 8 years of being in the House, have led to. And I'm disappointed. I see the same concerns that have been already expressed on the language there. And to justify the explanatory language by the debate that was had in the committee on the original language of the resolution, as well as the House and Senate, I think is a flawed argument. With all due respect to those that are making that argument, the legislative or the explanatory text was not a part of the resolution that was presented to the committee or the House or Senate as we proceeded to this point that we are now. And so I'm concerned about that. And I want to express my concerns and clarify for the record the exact process we went through. And that even though I was in support of the amendment as proposed, the resolution for the amendment, I do not support this explanatory language because it is not clear, certainly as raised by previous representative concerning the seal language, but it is also not fully explanatory of the early voting text that is there. And so for that reason, I will not be supporting the explanatory language. And I wish we had had the opportunity to debate the proposed amendment, because I think that would have clarified a lot of our concerns with the language that was being presented by OLR. And I have greater concern that the statutory reference of subject to approval by the Joint Standing Committee is essentially being ignored, that we are essentially becoming a rubber stamp for whatever OLR provides. Understanding that they are nonpartisan does not mean that we as a committee are subject to deem everything they do as perfect and approved by our action without debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Just for the second time, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the second time, I'll be brief. And I just had 2 follow-up questions. And I guess this one is for OLR. If I'm not mistaken, the OLR, and to talk just a little bit about Representative Fishbein asking the question about the time frame not being in that explanatory text, it is my understanding that OLR did consider a time frame in that text. Is that correct?
Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we did consider whether or not that would be something to note, and we decided, well, obviously we landed on the document that's before you, through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So Representative Mastrosco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm just curious what the reason was why they didn't include it. And I know you guys, you have discussed it and considered it, but what was the reason for saying, no, this should not be in there for you, Mr. Chairman?
I just want to be, we're now discussing items not before the committee, so I just want to be a little careful of this line of question, Representative again, because we're now discussing items that were not part of the underlying post text that we are being asked to approve or not approve. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as was said earlier, what the resolution says is it allows the General Assembly to provide by law for early voting, and it doesn't reference a time frame. But what the text is, the purpose of the text is to say what is in the resolution and not what isn't in the resolution, because there are any number of things that aren't in the resolution, and so we generally stick to what's in it, and so for that reason we decided not to say anything about it. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Mastrosco.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, I was going to mention something about what Representative France said is about the process. I think we've talked about it enough, but when you don't let us talk about the process, it becomes partisan, and that's the problem. But through you, Mr. Chair, could somebody on the committee explain to the people that are watching exactly when this explanatory text goes out, how is it utilized? Is it sent to town hall? Is there an explanation in the application for absentee ballots or the ballot itself? Is it posted at the polling places? Exactly how is this information going to be communicated to the public? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. I was going to do that before the vote was taken, but I'll do it now if I can. And then I ask OLR to please fill any gaps that we leave. This 2-38 is the statute that requires OLR to prepare the text subject to the GAE committee's approval. It also requires Secretary of State's office to send the text to each town clerk, registrar, and sufficient supply for public distribution. And to send the registrars at least 3 posters for each polling place in their town. So it'll be distributed by the Secretary of State, the town clerk, and registrars, and then posted in each polling location throughout each town. In addition, the explanatory text must be included as part of the following. Pursuant to CGS 9-4A, section B10, by law, Secretary of State must prepare a voter guide for each state election. Explanatory text is included as part of this guide. And 2, pursuant to CGS section 9-140D, the explanatory text is included as part of an absentee ballot set. So it'll be sent out to the town clerks, registrars, posted in each voting location, including the voter guide put together by Secretary of State, included in the absentee ballot sets sent out to those that request absentee ballots. That's sufficient, Representative?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to confirm there's going to be language or an insert, if I'm not mistaken, in the absentee ballot itself and not the application. Is that correct?
I believe so. 9-140 subsection D requires explanatory text to be included as part of the absentee ballot set. So based, I believe it's included in the absentee ballot set, not the application. I think is that correct, OLR?
Yes, Mr. Chair. An absentee voting set shall consist of, absentee ballot in or out of envelopes, instructions for its use, and if applicable, explanatory text concerning ballot questions as provided in 2-30A. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, the Representative, you are correct. It'll be included within the ballot set, not the application.
Okay, that's what I wanted to confirm. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions? Senator Sampson, for the second time, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I said I wasn't going to speak again, but after listening to some of my colleagues, I wanted to make a couple more brief comments. I appreciated your co-chair's comments. She mentioned that this statement should be a fair explanation. She also said it should be a clear way for voters to understand in our comments. And that's what I've been saying throughout this entire process. So I'm glad to see that she's in agreement there. And I just want the members of the committee to sit back for a second and think to themselves, what is the purpose of having explanatory text? I mean, why does this provision even exist in our laws? And I think it's pretty obvious. The reason for it is because we want to make sure that voters have access to additional information beyond the question so that they can make an informed decision. With respect to the commentary that I'm hearing from Mr. Adams, and I think he's completely doing his job to the best of his ability, and he's completely on point, except that I think there's something lost in the translation here, which is that the bill was a partisan document. Okay, you cannot start with a partisan document and then regurgitate that partisan document using similar language without taking into consideration other content and purpose that may be generated by that legislation, and not end up with a partisan result. And I'm just going to point out that when this vote is taken today and it falls on party lines, number one, it'll be another instance of another election bill that goes down on a party line vote, which should never happen, in my opinion. We should at least agree to the rules of the game. But it's also proof, unmistakable proof, that the statement of text, the explanatory statement, is partisan. Because if it wasn't partisan, we would all agree to it. Now, I don't fault Mr. Adams or OLR. They're doing their best at interpreting 230A. Maybe the problem was with 230A. But I will say that the purpose of the bill is not even listed in this explanatory statement. I mean, the pro argument statement of purpose would be that this is a convenience to voters. I mean, that's what was argued. And that is, without question, the purpose of the legislation from the people that voted for it. And that isn't mentioned anywhere in the language that's here. And I think that's a mistake. People should be provided the information. Say, you have this question before you on the ballot because you have to make a decision about whether or not you believe the added convenience of having early voting outweighs the potential for problems or additional cost or ballot security or whatever the con opinion is based on this passing. And it's true that much of that is not going to appear in the language of the bill. But we have all kinds of bills come through the legislature that you might not be able to tell what the ramifications are from, a bill that simply changes a may to a shall or something. The purpose of this legislation is different from what the statement of text says. The content is, I think, more closely aligned. And I think the focus on content is what gets in the way of really providing the objective truth to the voter. That's all. So I don't want to ramble on. I just wanted to end with that statement that, we include all of this content about the seals and things like that, but convenience is not mentioned. And that is the number one purpose of the legislation. And that you cannot start with a partisan document and write it using the same terms and end up without a partisan document. You've got to read between the lines to state the purpose. And if you truly want a fair explanation, as Senator Flexer pointed out, and so do I think you've got to make some kind of effort to tell both sides of the story so that voters can really make an informed choice. And I'll just leave it with that. And I hope that others might at least agree with me that we should look at 230A next time. Maybe simply changing it to require a unanimous vote of the GAE committee. Because until you have a unanimous vote that what is put before those voters is objective, it's not. It's going to be a partisan result. And thank you for your indulgence for a second time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no more comments or questions, committee will now hold the vote. Votes will be held open at 5 o'clock. Please, whoever votes will be held open at 5 o'clock. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Flexer,
You're on mute, Ms. Senator.
Senator Flexer votes yes.
Fox,
Representative Fox votes yes.
one more time, please. There you go. Thank you. Haskell, Thomas,
Rep. Thomas votes yes.
Sampson,
Senator Sampson votes no.
Master Francesco,
Representative Master Francesco votes no.
Blumenthal,
Representative Blumenthal votes yes.
Carpino, Fishbein,
Representative Fishbein votes no.
France,
Representative France votes no.
Haddad,
Representative Haddad votes yes.
Labriola,
Representative Labriola votes no.
McCarthy Vehi,
Representative McCarthy Vahey votes yes.
McCrory, Senator McCrory, Morinbello,
Morinbello votes yes.
Palm, Rosario,
Representative Rosario in the affirmative.
Santiago,
Santiago votes yes.
Slack,
Senator Slapp votes yes.
Senator McCrory. All set, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Votes still open at 5 o'clock. I appreciate your patience and your input today. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Please recess until 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there. Hey, Valentine, are you there?
Hi, Senator. Yes, I'm here.
Hey, I think I missed a vote earlier.
You did miss a vote, but I called the tally on that one. So, you can't vote now. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm all set.
You're all set. Yes,
All
you're
right.
all set.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Hi, Senator Haskell.
Hey, Valentina, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. I think I was able to vote on the procedural issue, but not on the underlying bill.
Yes, correct.
Got it. I would like to vote, to be clear, yes is to approve, right?
Correct, yes.
Great. I'd like to vote yes.
You're all set, Senator.
Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.
You too, thank you. Hi, Senator, you missed one vote today?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
This is the final vote?
yes.
I vote yes.
You are all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Representative.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I would like to vote yes.
You're all set, Representative.
Thank you, ma'am. Enjoy the end of your summer.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, Madam Clerk, can you hear me okay?
Hi, Representative. Yes, I can hear you. You just
Yes.
with one
Yes,
vote.
I'd like to register my vote as an abstention, please.
You are all set, Representative.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.